Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Politics Matter. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope you'll join in on the conversation. Our phone lines will be open, and that number to call in is 1-587-602-4293. Before we begin today, I want to thank you all for subscribing to our channel. You can head on over to our website, communications-inc.org, to subscribe for our mailing list and to stay up to date with our next live events and our available merchandise. We are also available for bookings. We have merchandise that is available through our website, Shopify, Patreon, and Amazon. You can contact us at any time. We are here to help with any questions. We are also here to give you, our listeners and our customers, the best week. Please help me welcome back our guest, Federico Milano.
Hello, thanks for inviting me again. It's good to be here.
Thank you for joining us again.
No problem.
I want to talk about Sudan. There have been over 2 million people that have been displaced throughout the Middle East, like South Sudan, Egypt, and a few others. What are the chances, do you think, that the government of Sudan will be able to provide an impact for its people, like food, water, shelter, education?
Sudan is one of the countries, with South Sudan, I believe it was the last country created in the African continent. There's countries that appear and others disappear. It's the way of the world, I guess. But represents a very serious crisis that is not being taken into account. I mean, African countries have been all around the clock on different crises, whether for corruption of their leaders, whether because of colonization, like it's the case of France, in which you can find how difficult it have been for those countries with natural resources to lift out of poverty because of the imperial action, which consists in that we take all the resources, we put elite, we weaponize the military, the police, and whomever opposes us, we kill and destroy. So the resources are in the hands of corporations, of foreign capital, and distribution of the wealth that are supposed to be as part of the income and the GDP end up in the hands of the elites and never in the schools, sanitary systems, infrastructure, development, railroads, you name it, for the benefit of the countries that are being exploited. So in that case, Sudan is in very deep trouble because the countries that have this kind of leadership will never provide for their citizens unless they are destituted by military coups. And we see tribal issues going in these different countries for one reason or another. The interest of the strong, in this case, whomever has the weapons, will control their country. So what Congo is going on, and many other countries, Eritrea, Ethiopia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and among others, Mali, so many are in so dire straits that are refusing the Commonwealth or the colonization programs in the 21st century that Europe has been accustomed for the last 500 years.
Do you think that Sudan does have any influence with what's going on for the Palestinians?
No, whatsoever. I mean, the crises are different. Like I said, these are crises that have been colonizing crises. We have to understand that, for example, France still have colonies in Africa, and France still receives money from the colonies. We have to understand that Africa is 54 countries right now. France had influence in 40 or more of their countries, to which they still receive royalties for their colonization programs. In that sense, in the 21st century, there's no country with any resources, even if it's infinite resource, which we know it's not the fact. Well, no country will advance or reach for getting out of the underdevelopment it has been submitted to. So that has nothing to do with Palestine. Palestine is another crisis where an occupying state created for the benefit of one state on a foreign territory that is Palestine, where all the Europeans and Americans and wherever Jews wanted to come to that new state formed in 1948 with Ben Gurion and became part of the United Nations in 1949. Well, with the support of all the elites of the world, especially the influence of the most powerful in those days, the British Empire, where the sun never set, or the French, for example, and the participation of the Americans by the end of the First World War, a war that was winning, that Germany was winning. The Central Empires, as they were known, were winning. So it is being seen as a betrayal from the organizations of the League of Nations, which was created after the First World War, for which America didn't took part on in the beginning, as a betrayal of the German people, to the German people, by the elites of the German people, and the participation of foreign forces like England, French, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, who destituted the Palestinians of their territory to give it to a foreign people that, according to them, is the will of God, Genesis 12, etc. But not only that, it's a reference to the immaturity and the conveniences created by the powers of that time. So this is more than 100 years in the making. And what is going on in Palestine nowadays, like Benjamin Netanyahu has said, their 9/11, where they are saying it themselves. 9/11 in the United States is proven to be costly, ineffective way to win the hearts and minds of the people around the world, because it has created nothing but enemies to the American people, these against Israel in the American and allies, for their abusive interventions around the world, especially in Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, you name it. So in that sense are two different crises, but with the Palestinian is nothing but another example of colonization, like Sudan and the African countries are all about. So in that sense, there is no difference. It's Israel as the United States of Israel, I will call them. Somebody mentioned that to me a few days ago, because it's what it seems to be. Since it has been adopted in the United States that money makers, donors, and influencers, I mean people, brute capital, corporations, etc., are deprived of exercising their First Amendment by promoting or not letting promote by constitution or government their candidates of their will, that is against the First Amendment. So that means that anybody with the money exercising their First Amendment has the power to control and destitute politicians, presidents of schools and universities anywhere in the world. So that approach to a civilization, it's a condemnation to civilization itself, because it doesn't let the peoples develop themselves, but only the people in power, which is a maxim that the state of Israel has had since the beginning of history. You can read about how to control politics and economy from the first books of the Torah. So it's a condition that the Israeli people have imposed in his allies, and that's the condition that the First World War, with the agreements in secret behind closed doors, Picot-Sykes agreements, distributed the land which were not theirs. And I'm talking about Syria and Iraq. Syria for France, Iraq for England, in order for them to exploit the oil in those countries, and of course giving Palestine to the Israelis on a move that started all this mess. So yeah, I would say that the colonization process is the same in any country, whether it's Congo or whether it's Sudan or whether it's Palestine.
In 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel took control over the entire peninsula of Sinai. The Suez Canal, the east bank of which was controlled by Israel, was closed. In 1979, Israel and Egypt signed a peace treaty. Israel pulled out of Sinai in several stages, including the removal of its settlements, which ended in 1982. What is the significance of that now?
Well, you came ready with okay questions. Like I said, the Suez Canal, Egypt, and all this, we have to remember that Egypt wanted to seize the Suez Canal for itself in order to stop the British to making money out of the Suez Canal, because the British wanted to protect the Suez Canal always, even since the First World War. It was one of the most important items in the chess game of war. in the First World War. So that hasn't changed. And we have to remember also and add to the question that in 1982, Israel decided to go to war against Lebanon and in Lebanon. And they committed massacres and atrocities in 1982 against women, children, and families. They literally massacred. But Hamas resisted from the Palestinian side and Hezbollah from the Lebanese side. And Hezbollah is better equipped, better armed, is not submitted like Palestine is submitted to a regulatory mandates in calories, how many calories you have, how many construction items get into. It's a prison. It's a prison. That's what it is, Palestine. In the case of Lebanon, it's totally contrary. In 1982, yes, Israel committed massacres, but like I said, in Lebanon, the resistance is at a different price, comes to against Israel at a different price, and they have different weaponry and better support lines, and they fought back and they kicked Israel out of Lebanon. But they suffer big time, as well as the Israeli army by the end of that occupation, in pretended occupation against Lebanon. So.
In 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel took control over the entire peninsula of Sinai. The Suez Canal, the east bank of which was controlled by Israel, was closed, and in 1979, Israel and Egypt signed a peace treaty. Israel pulled out of Sinai in several stages, including the removal of its settlements, which ended in 1982. And because of that, the Israelis are not allowed to go into the northern Sinai. Only the people of Egypt and tourists are allowed. But now the problem is that that's where the Israelis are pushing the Palestinians to.
Exactly. That is a very important question because it has so many. That question have to multiply it in different questions. It is just very difficult to answer in one sentence. But let's go for the first part. You said that in 1967,
during the Six-Day War, Israel took control over the entire peninsula of Sinai.
Exactly. Okay, let's begin with that one. That part is important because it made an agreement with the rest of the world in order for Sinai, once Israel returned some of the places or areas or territory, it was going to be okay, but it's not the case right now. In those years, after the history moment that you just mentioned in 1967, yes, it was accorded by the United Nations, not also that the peninsula, Sinai Peninsula, will be, of course, Egyptian, but also in order to avoid confrontation, now that there was agreements, like you just mentioned in your question, between Israel and Egypt, in order for Egypt to stop the settlements of the Jewish state that were expanding, of course, in the peninsula of the Sinai. So in order to prevent that, in that year and subsequent years, there was a multinational force, meaning that peoples from the United Nations will assist in the keeping the peace in the Middle East between Egypt, Israel, and other countries that, like the Yom Kippur War in 1973, that establishes new approaches in order to relate the new state, relatively new, 1948 and 1973, of Israel, and how to fit it into the Arabic neighbors that he had, especially after the 6 Days War that you mentioned, 1967, 1972 with the Yom Kippur War, and then the consequent agreements. So Sinai became a multinational task into which to keep the peace. But now it's different. Compared to those days, Israel had breaking all international law, is taking over Sinai by his own will. It has the support of Jordan, the king of Jordan, to which his Palestinian wife disagrees with him. Whomever have read the letter that she wrote is totally in contravention with the official policy of her husband, the king of Jordan. And the same is happening with Egypt. We see now Egypt saying, okay, Israel, that's more than enough. You attack Rafah, this is it. And now Egypt is aligning with other interests that are not necessarily the Israeli interests. And that is just part of the question. So yeah, the Sinai right now is part of the greater Israel that Benjamin Netanyahu showed us on the map last year, in as his colonizing empire expansion, as he doesn't shy away to say it, of course. And now that has been called by the Criminal Court of Justice with three other Hamas leaders and his Minister of War. So Benjamin Netanyahu can be arrested in any of the countries that are part of the International Criminal Court. That's the first part. The other part of the question was
the Suez Canal, the east bank of which was controlled by Israel, is now closed.
Yeah, exactly. For territories, for like you mentioned in your question, tourism and stuff like that. Well, that is coming to an end right now because of the conflict against Palestinians, the occupation against Palestinians, and that is totally unacceptable. Like I said, Egypt is fighting back. Is saying, okay, we're not going to go any further, man. You're going way too far with this. And this, like I said, aligning with other structural forces against the interests of the Americans and the Israelis for now. We understand that Jerusalem, for example, the East Bank and the West Bank. The West Bank was part of the map decided after the 1967 war that you mentioned. It was not a war. Actually, it was an abuse of Israel for many of us that have read in the newspapers and read in the books that it was Israel who bravely came about and recognized that there was a Manhattan attack before. So the Air Force of Egypt, the Air Force in Syria, in Jordan, and were destroyed because of the mighty army of Israel. Because they attacked without any prevention whatsoever. They just decided to attack by surprise, and they attack without being attacked whatsoever. So that is a false interpretation that has been debunked by many, like Norman Finkelstein and Ilan Pappé, and many others historians, Jewish historians. So this is not making it; is Jewish serious history academicians speaking about this matter. So yeah, this is going to be an issue that is not going to stop until somebody stops Israel, and it's not going to be United States or allies for now.
Yeah, and the other part of the question was, in 1979, Israel and Egypt signed a peace treaty.
Yeah, it was necessary because, like I said, after the Yom Kippur War in 1973, they signed a peace treaty because it was necessary. They were sick of fighting against each other, and it was against the conveniences of trade, the Suez Canal, and the trade between the United States and its interests with the World Trade Organization, who wanted to impose tariffs and products only from the United States into not only Arabia but Far East, that is China, the Global South, you name it. So it was needed a peace treaty in those days, and it happened. And thanks God it did. But what happened with that peace treaty is that opposes the Palestinian Liberation Organization, coming from Egypt, a supposed Muslim country, where the principles of the Quran and the principles of the church itself demand to look for peace. The lesser jihad is war. The higher jihad is the protocolary items that you can use when you use diplomacy instead of war. Okay, so yeah, it was absolutely necessary, and I'm glad that it lasted, but the problem was that it was in order to protect Israeli interest, first of all, and then Palestinians. All treaties that have happened since the war in 1967, all treaties that have happened in Camp David, the Abraham Accords just recently, you name it, with any other presidents, whether Bill Clinton, whether George Bush, whether whomever has been president of the United States, is always to favor and to give advantages to Israel in order to keep controlling Palestinians. There will not be a sovereign country in Palestine whatsoever as long as Israel is there. And that is a common goal not only from the prime ministers of Israel, whomever they are, since the creation of the state, but also by Americans, British, and allies. So it's nothing new. but who is now in charge is ex-general in Egypt, Mr. Al-Sisi, who is in favor of the political interests and the American interests in the region, and the same with Jordan, which is a puppet for many academicians and political thinkers, is seen as a puppet, just like the Shah of Iran was in Iran in the 1950s. So when you see the view of the king of Jordan and the opinions of his wife, they are so different because she's Palestinian and he is for the interests of Israel and Americans and allies in the region. Well, that demonstrates that this alliance now, with what has been happening the last few days by Egypt saying this is enough, we don't align with Israel principles or American principles, at least they are showing a little inconformity with the way this hegemony, imperial hegemony of colonization is operating in the 21st century.
And since then, Israel had pulled out of Sinai in several stages, including the removal of its settlements, which ended in 1982.
Yeah, you just mentioned that, but that is not the truth. What is happening is that the settlements are being expanded in the West Bank, not in the East Bank, but yes, in the West Bank. Why? Because the East belongs to Israel. It's already controlled by Israel. We have to understand that Palestine is a controlled zone. It's a prison, like these persons that I already mentioned said, and it's true. You don't understand it unless it happens to you, or unless you have been in prison, or unless you have been on a state that where only a dictatorial understanding of how to treat their own civilians or the civilians. It's all about that dictatorships, autocracies, fanatic religious people in charge, all that kind of dictators that the United States, Israel, and the European Union are allies with. One example being Saudi Arabia. So, in this sense, there's nothing but people that are protecting the interests of Israel and the United States in the region. I repeat, but the occupation of Palestine has shown us that these people are looking for power by power through the use of power instead of looking for diplomatic resolutions, instead of looking for intellectual, peaceful understanding of how to deal with others. It's just the way we say, or else we kill you and destroy you. It's not we're going to make arrangements, we're going to make a deal, we're going to find what is the best for both parts. No. The imperial attitude of Israel, the United States and the UK, and allies, is to impose their will whatsoever, no matter what. Take the resources of others, keep them in impoverishment, keep them in poverty, keep them... Examples we have since 1492. The Global South has fought terrorism since 1492. This is nothing new. It's just the Americans, Israel, and allies who invented it in 2001. The terrorist attacks, when they are the most worst terrorists, proven by the occupation of Israel in 2023 after October the 7th. See, though this didn't start in October the 7th, it started, like I mentioned, more than 100 years ago.
1948.
And with the creation of the State of Israel, no doubt.
Now that the Israelis are not allowed to go to northern Sinai, only the people of Egypt and tourists. And the problem is that's where the Israelis are pushing the Palestinians to.
The Israelis are pushing the Palestinians to anywhere that is not Palestine. And if you see the map on the United Nations, it takes Egypt included. So the Great Israel includes Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Palestine, of course, Syria, Iraq. Jesus Christ. In other words, what they're saying is that again, power by the power through power is the only goal of humanity and civilization. That's according to Benjamin Netanyahu himself and the United States attitude, providing weapons and bombs, diplomatic support, political support, economic support to a genocidal regime. So what happened is that the world reacted with China, with Russia, and said, F you, we're not going to take this any longer, we're going to create our own economy, you're not going to manipulate us with SWIFT, you're not going to manipulate us with the destruction of our infrastructure, like it happened with Stream 2, Nord Stream 2, etc., etc. If there is something that history has tell us, is that the United States Israel, with Israel, the United Kingdom, and the European Union is demonstrating is that they are not for us, the country and the world, that they are not representing the people, but elites and people with a lot of money and power in order to make decisions in our name that we have not decided for and that we should be consulted. Okay? Consulted to. I mean, in the sense, what happened with the pandemic? Put the pandemic 6 feet away, you have to put it in, well, 97% effectivity. If you don't use it, you're going to kill everybody around you, divide and conquer, and so they did. And the benefit went to the big pharmaceutical processors and pharmaceuticals, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, more than $100 billion in 2022 alone, with money that is from the state, that is tax money. That money was invested in Wuhan in order to produce a virus that killed almost 7 million people and keeps killing youth all around the world with the side effects, and that was not ready to implement. And anyway, the profit was kept for the corporations and not redistributed to the people that pay for the studies, which is the taxpayer. What does that tell you? That the maxim of the interpretation of the Torah is that whomever has the money has the power. It cannot work. That principle is what the Chicago Boys apply, and that is only us have the ability to know better. We, the private sector, are the most educated. We come from the Ivy League universities. We have the best degrees in the best universities in the world. We are the richest people. We have to command and tell how to control the people. The people have nothing to tell us what to do. We have to destroy and get rid of the government because you, the people, are the government. As government is elected by the people, we need to take all the rights and freedoms from the people. And that's what they're doing. So when you are confronted with the outcomes of having the money, it is the one that calls the shots, is totally against government, is anti-democratic, is anti-constitutional, is devolving as a civilization, and only privileges very few that think they have the right to kill and destroy whomever they wish, with zero moral or ethical grounds whatsoever, which is what is confronting really the Palestinian genocide right now, because there's moral and ethical positions that have to transcend the power of money, something that the capitalists, brute capitalists, the colonizers don't want to understand because nobody is stopping them. It is time to stop them, and that's what the world is showing in their marches. That's what the world is showing in the educational system, in the protests in more than 100 universities in the United States, in Amsterdam, in Italy, in France, here in Canada, that if you follow my program, you will see and react today on YouTube, if I'm not censored, because I'm being heavily censored on YouTube and Facebook. So, of course, and you will understand. But to say that power, through power, is the climax of a civilization and is the way to be a civilization is the most absurd, devolving, idiotic, anti-civilized approach anybody can have, and that's the approach of the colonizing powers of Israel, the United States of Israel, and its allies.
And also, there has been a significant economic activity of the Bedouin tribes that have been smuggling. They have been active in smuggling of supplies and weapons into the Gaza Strip by way of cross-border tunnels, as well as assisting illegal migrants into Israel. These activities have been curtailed by the Egyptian government, cracked down on smuggling into the Gaza Strip, and by the building of the Israel-Egypt border. North Sinai has since in 2011 been especially affected by the Sinai insurgency and measures by the government forces to combat it, which has resulted in many casualties.
Well, again, I don't know when you came with these questions, but damn, those are very important questions that you don't hear on the mainstream media whatsoever. As a student of policy and politics, I can say that, yeah, the Bedouins are an integral part of the contraband, let's say, of people and weapons. That might be true. I haven't seen any reports of Bedouins even though I have seen from the 70s and 80s, sure, but I haven't seen anything on this occupation. But they are being accused, of course, of smuggling people, because there's people from Palestine or Bedouins that they work for very little money, and they can be smuggled into Israel in order to work in the settlements. They want to make some money to survive. They only have sheep and very few cattle and rams all around the place, running around in open areas. And they have to survive somehow, and the cause for the occupation and many other aspects that have to do with justice and truth according to the poorest people in Palestine, which are also the Bedouins. You can understand that if it has been reported and covered and demonstrated that if an Israeli makes a call to the police and says that a Bedouin stole one of his sheep, the police comes and take all the sheep from the Bedouin and give it to the Israeli guy. So injustices like this that have been occurring since 1948 that are not being reported because, like I said, the Bedouins are people that live in Palestine, just like Jews lived in Palestine in 1908, in 1905. In the beginning of the last century, there were maximum 10%, 8 to 10% Jewish people living in Palestine. The rest were Arab people, Christians, and Christian, Muslims, and Jews lived together for hundreds of years in Palestine, including during the Ottoman Empire. You know? It was the Zionist movement that decided that we, the rich people of Israel, want to create a state according to the Bible, because that's what the Bible said, and let's use the Americans and the Europeans and the Christians according to Scofield and other traductions and versions and interpretations of the Bible that tells that Israel is to be protected, and they expanded like a bomb in the United States thanks to Pulitzer and thanks to the implementation of the Judaization of Christianity in the United States, and it worked just fine. Nowadays we have 60 to 70 million Christians that say and believe, according to their pastors, that the interpretation of the Bible of Genesis 12 is that Israel have the right to kill and destroy whomever they feel like, including themselves, including all Christians, including everybody. It doesn't matter if it's Finlander, Sweden, Canadian, American, doesn't matter. If it's Israel, they have the right to kill. God said so in Genesis 12. So that approach, when you deal with people that think like this and are emotionally educated to think like whomever opposes them are to be killed, which is Palestine and what happened with the 7 cooks that were working for an international organization in order to feed the Palestinian people. They were persecuted, they were destroyed, they were targeted. They don't care, guys, if you're Canadian, American, Sweden, or Finlander. They will kill you the same as long as you don't interfere with their vision of the world, which is war, destroy and kill whomever opposes. Amalek, from the book of Samuel, one of the 2 books of Samuel. So, when you see the world like this, you cannot make friends. You're gonna have enemies. And in the United Nations Charter, what Hamas is doing is considered resistance. So for all of those who said that October the 7th, these things comes, like I said, more than 100 years in the making. It is an act of resistance. I feel bad for the people that die and the people kidnapped. Yes, I do. It cannot be fun for the people of Israel to lost loving ones. So it's not for the Palestinians. So don't do unto others what you don't like to be done unto you. But if your policy is to kill and destroy everybody who opposes you, you're not going to make friends, dude. That's for sure.
Exactly. And
that's not the way to win the hearts and minds, America.
Exactly. And I also wanted to mention that in 1988, Jordan severed its ties with the West Bank, and until 1989, and from August until November 1993, when the country held its first multi-party election since 1956. Why did they sever their ties with them for that long, and do you think they would gain back their ties with them?
It never happened. The Jordanians are like I said with Israel. They always have been, especially after the war in 1967 and the Yom Kippur War, when, like you just mentioned, in 79, but even before 79, there was already Egypt and Jordan make peace treaties with Israel before 1979 and make arrangements not to attack each other. So, it's very telling. Nothing has changed in reality. In practice, I mean, they can speak about documents, they can speak about treaties, they can speak about Camp David, they can speak about, like I mentioned before, all the treaties that have happened since 1967. But the truth is that as long as Israel is protected politically, with weaponry, financially, there's not going to be peace in the Middle East whatsoever.
And Arab countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Egypt, Qatar, and the UAE collectively own the Arab Petroleum Pipeline Company known as the Sumed Pipeline. And it's headquartered in Egypt's Alexandria, which is even now still supplying Israel with crude oil and helping its genocide in Gaza. And these are just some of them that are supporting Israel. They condemn the attack, yet they are still helping Israel. And the only country that has had the support for the Palestinians is Lebanon. What is the point of the ICJ now?
Yeah, well, like your questions are loaded, very loaded. I mean, wow, it takes a lot of explanations. First, you asked the question about the Muslim countries. There's countries that are Arab countries and there are countries that are not Arab countries. There's like 53 Arab countries around the world, in the world, which represent more than 1 billion Muslims. And there's not other and there's other countries that are not Arab, like Iran, for example, which is Muslim too, but it's Shia Muslim. Saudi Arabia is Sunni Muslim. So, like you said, why don't they, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, etc., Saudi Arabia, supporting Israel? Well, it's a matter of common interest. There's no loyalty whatsoever, not even to their God, not even to their religion when it comes to common interests. It's a political view of the world. I manage that to be insane because the loyalty should be to their God, like the Yemenis do, for example. The Yemenis have the courage to fight against Britain, to fight against Saudi Arabia, to fight against American troops. They were bombarded, more than 800,000 people killed, millions of people displaced from Yemen. I'm talking about Obama years. And the Yemenis are the only ones that are fighting for sins and from the moral ground and moral and ethical ground of their beliefs. And that is what the United States and, of course, the genocidal government of Benjamin Netanyahu is doing against Palestine is wrong. But Yemen doesn't have the same pool as Saudi Arabia, as Iran, or in this case, United Arab Emirates. Why? Because the common interest between Yemen and Israel is not as big as Saudi Arabia with Israel whatsoever, neither the other countries that you just mentioned in your question. So it's about common interest. Their loyalties are not with their God, nor with their beliefs. Their loyalties are where the money comes, where business are produced, where income, GDP, super rich corporations can become even richer, and that's where their interests are. If they're going to go to war against Israel for what's going on in Palestine, it will be an example to give morally or ethically according to their religion. They have to protect each other. They don't want the expansion of Israel in their territory. Well, they will defend it. And it's also contemplated in the Human Rights Watch and the Geneva Convention and the United Nations, which is the right to protect, which is exactly what Russia did for the people in Donetsk and Luhansk and Donetsk. So the right to protect. But this doesn't apply because the interest of Saudi Arabia, Arab Emirates, and many other Arab countries, oil producers, are for the people that buy their oil. And Israel has treaties and deals of oil and gas and energy with Saudi Arabia. If Saudi Arabia goes against Israel or attacks Israel in the name of an ethical or moral positions, which should be the case, well, their common interest will go to hell. And very probably the United States will break relationships with Saudi Arabia, which will be great for the Global South, because the Global South demands oil. China needs oil, so it will be perfect for the division that have been created by the United States of Israel, UK, the European Union and allies over the centuries, but let's say since the Second World War, is not working. So when the common interests are what holds more value, the ethical and moral questions go to hell. And that is something that power by itself is not confronting. So that opens the reality, which is it's common interest. Sorry, you're going to be destroyed, you're going to be killed, but we have very important interests with Israel, and Israel is part of the Western world, and we export billions of dollars to the Western world. We don't want to ruin that. We want to have wonderful commercial relationships, so money comes first above God, above moral grounds, above the sacred books, etc. Even though these countries have not made separations between church and state. For example, Saudi Arabia, neither has done Iran. So it's not a complicated question. It's a matter of studying the politics and knowing the history behind it in order to, you can disagree with what I'm saying. Please make it on the comments if you disagree and in what. But this is the reality when it comes to geopolitics. It's common interest. There's no loyalty base. But now what Israel is doing against Palestine has demonstrated that there has to be a value and a moral and ethical ground when it comes to relationships and geopolitical relationships, without which there's not going to be civilization. If a civilization is based only on power and the will of God, as they call it, because they can justify what is happening in the Arab countries, I mean Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, which are super rich countries, compared to Palestine, which is poor, broke, is not even a state, for Christ's sake. So that can change hopefully soon, even though with the abstinence of the United States and Canada to support the creation of the state of Palestine, which is very telling, and where their loyalties in this case are. So in that case, because of what's happening again with the occupation in Palestine, many countries, beginning with South America and Colombia, President of Brazil, Lula da Silva, President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, President of Chile also have said, okay, Israel, we got it with you, man. And many other countries are breaking relationships or calling their ambassadors in order to break political and diplomatic relations with Israel. And not only that, with the United States and allies. The devaluation of the dollar, the spiritual grounds of what is going on has no support, not biblically, but in the Talmud, not in the Torah. The law of Moses doesn't apply here. I have demonstrated biblically how to debunk the Genesis 12 manipulation, tergiversation of the true meaning of the deal, let's say, or the covenant, as they call it, between God and the Israeli people. It was with Abraham. It was not with Israel. There's two different things. I'll explain that in my program if you want to watch it. It's called The Biblical Part on YouTube. Okay, so when the moral grounds and the ethical grounds are totally disregarded, civilization is done, because that means that only the strong will survive. And what is justice? As Plato with Thrasymachus mentioned 2,300 years ago, is what is in the interest of the strong. Well, the interests of the strong have demonstrated in the last 200 years, but especially since the Second World War, that the interests of the strong are self-destructive, planetary destructive, that are against everybody else in the world, against they have it their way, and that is not a civilization. That is a colonization plan. And that is not happening in the 21st century. We used to believe, but yes, in front of our eyes, since October the 7th, the justification for more than 500 years of failure of the political system, repeating over and over again since 1492 that colonization is the best way to go, prove themselves over and over again to fail, is insanity, is political insanity. I said it first in December the 9th in my discourse to the Canadian people. So the point has come into the ethical and moral values, the God kind values that are supposed to be superior and above humanity, will never, if there's a God, he will never oppose the understanding between nations, the cooperations between nations. He opposes war as is well established in the books of the Pentateuch. The first 5 books of the Bible is also in the Quran for the people that are Muslim. And it's also in the Bhagavad Gita. The principles and understanding between nations are mandatory, are fundamental for the coexistence of the world. But America, United States of Israel, the UK, the European Union do not understand that concept, since they have been conquerors since 1492. So they believe that is the only way to keep on going. And China, Russia, and the global south, for the first time in 2300 years, are going to show them, and is showing them, that we are not going to abide by that mandate, because that is anti-evolutionary, it's devolving. It is not the way. Like I explained before in many of my programs, power is not the way. I mean, if you consider that a civilization ends with power to destroy the other, that's very stupid, very little, very diminished way to understand what a civilization is. Power by itself is not the end. Power is the means. In order to understand, we have the power to live and to destroy, to live and to die. It's in our hands. What you need to administer a civilization is wisdom, which is what Israel, the United States, the UK, the European Union has demonstrated for 500 years don't have. Lack, absolutely, of understanding and goodwill to understand that whomever is developing this civilization is them. So, what will be the solution according to them? Destroy what opposes them. And that is the civilization itself that is wanting and don't want to ask permission from the United States or Israel to be sovereign, free, to declare their independence from the powers that be that have destroyed us for so long.
It's like there's no morals anymore. I mean, is there a country that is not corrupt?
There's corruption everywhere. Corruption is everywhere. People are saying that it's a human condition, so live with it, get used to it, fuck it. No, I don't think so, Pa. So it's people kill everywhere, so let's kill everybody, let's kill together. No, I don't think so, dude. This is the understanding of power that have been operating on Earth since the civilization, as we can call it, begun. And this is the test of men, to transcend this position and imposition by the powerful. The moment we understand that we will be free, that's what Jesus wanted to say, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Well, we are seeing the truth in front of our eyes. We are not being represented by our politicians. Our politicians are nothing but ambitious career mongers that don't care about you or I. They just want to make deals and know and be with the super important people, to keep killing and destroying their opponents, and to be keeping and destroying our resources and our planet like we have done from the beginning of the last century in the name of capitalism. Okay, so we the people are back to the wars of independence in order to understand the truth. The truth is that these systems of operation for the last 500 years have failed, and they want us to believe that they still can make it. No, 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 no. They already proven for 500 years. They are the problem. They are the problem. These elected politicians, these lobbies, what I mentioned in the beginning of the program, what is the right of a trillionaire to put a president in the university or remove it according to his whim and caprice? Disregarding ethicals, morals, God, disregarding everything because the power of money says so. In what civilizations can thrive with such understanding of a civilization? That is tyranny. That is the definition of tyranny. That is not a civilization, you fools. And we, the people, are to demonstrate you that we already find the truth and we want to be free. The wars for independence are back, and that independence is from the capital understanding and this view of civilization which have served us for nothing for way too long.
And we need to get everything back. We need to get our
institutions, our moral ground, our capacity to discern and not to be deceived, and the media is to blame in this matter. The media is to be replaced too. I have created a company with somebody I know that is looking for solutions to these matters, but I receive nothing but censorship. I created a program on YouTube and on Rumble, and I receive censorship by the millions of people, from 4 million to 0 or 10. So when you live in a world that controls even your way of thinking, you are not living in a civilization, you're living in a tyranny, and you are not free. And that means you don't know the truth.
And speaking about that, Trudeau wants to pass a bill,
Bill C-63.
C-63, banning people from saying anything online.
Yeah, exactly. If you say that Israel is committing genocide, you can go to jail for life, according to Bill 63. How's that?
What do you think, guys? Let us know in the comments. I want to thank you for joining us today.
Hey, no problem. very important questions. I was not ready for such questions. I hope I said a little bit. We can expand for hours on these matters, on each of the topics you questioned today. So I'm glad I can be of service for you Canadians. And you, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can check out our other podcast, Author's Corner, on Spotify, Audible, and where podcasts are available. You can also head on over to our website, communications-inc.org, to subscribe to our mailing list and to stay up to date with live events and available merchandise. You can also join and subscribe to our community on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Rumble, YouTube, Tumblr, and Patreon. We are accepting donations through our website and through Patreon as well. Let us know what you think in the comments, and we will be happy to take any suggestions from our audience. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next week.